Welcome to Rock and Roll Book Club, where we discuss books by and about musicians and the music business. I'm Shelley, and on this episode, me and my co-host Dave and Jen are digging into Horror Stories, a memoir by one of my personal favorites, Liz Phair. If you haven't read the book, this is your one and only spoiler alert.
Liz Phair she's currently, as we're recording this, celebrating her 30th anniversary of her debut album, Exile In Guyville. This was the one that sort of put her on the map and made her famous back in the 90s. But a memoir touches quite a bit on her career, but there's a whole lot more personal stuff that's going on in it. Just how wild I would be. I thought before we started diving into the book, we go over sort of our initial impressions of Liz Phair, kind of how you got to where you are with Liz. And I could start with me in that I was an early adopter. I got into her with the first record when Exile In Guyville came out. I was living in Seattle, saw her on that tour. Wasn't great. She was she had tons of stage fright, trouble projecting, which was unusual. Usually by the time a person has a national record out and you're going to see them, they've already kind of worked all that stuff out. She definitely hadn't. Saw her a few years ago at 8035 over in Des Moines, and she was great. So she's obviously worked all that stuff out. I liked her music up to a point. I liked the first three records a lot. And then I kind of check out a little bit after that. That would be my story on there. Shelley, what's your Liz Phair origin story?
Yeah, I would say mine's pretty similar to yours. I was also on board pretty early on and, was obsessed with Exile In Guyville. And then I didn't really like Whip Smart all that much. I never got super into it, but White Chocolate Space Egg, I absolutely loved. I thought it was great. And then I kind of fell off after that too. But what's funny is that I'm confident in saying that I absolutely love her music, even though I don't jam out to every single one of her records. I had heard the thing about stage fright as well. And I saw her, it wasn't as early on as when you saw her, but I saw her, I believe it was it Lollapalooza, or what was the women's music festival?
Oh, Lilith Phair.
Lilith Phair.
Yeah, or Lilith Phair. It was one of those two. I saw her at the World in Chicago. And she was great. But I remember thinking like, oh, I've heard she hates performing live and I feel so bad for her. But overall, my impressions of her as an artist is that she's a badass and she tells it like it is. And she tells it more brutally than probably people want her to. And I've always really respected her for that.
Okay. Jen, let's your Liz Phair origin story. I'm imagining is a little bit different.
Let me first start out by saying I am allergic to that genre. Like the female 90s rock or whatever it is, alternative. I mean, from Alanis, like I can't. It's just not my genre. I have a lot to say about Liz, but I will start by saying I've really never been a fan.
Okay.
You're really taking it easier on her now.
Yeah, fair enough.
Based on our pre-recording discussions.
Yeah. No, that's
a lot more to say.
Look,
I just have never listened. It's never caught me. It's never anything I've wanted to seek out. And often, even now, when she's got some new stuff out, when I hear it on our overhead that we have on all the time, I turn it.
General idea on the book and what she was trying to do is this is pretty much the antithesis of the Belinda Carlisle book. In her memoir, it was just a straight chronological recitation of facts. This is my life. I was born here. This happened. This happened. This happened. Now we're in a book where this memoir is stories of different times in her life, not specified when. They're not in chronological order. I was often confused as to what time in her life the story was, but at the end, I don't from her perspective, I don't think that mattered because it was supposed to be giving a general feel. And I think that there were themes. A big part of the theme, in my opinion, and I'll lay this out for everyone, is identity. And she has identity issues in three separate ways as I saw it, right? So number one is that she was adopted, and that a lot of adopted children often have questions about their identity, as in, who are my biological parents? Why am I really like this? Is there some mystery that I need to know? There's a little bit of that in the story. She addresses it when she has a child and stuff. There's also the issue of her appearance and the way she looks, and the positives and negatives from that, from sort of being seen as a sex symbol in her famous career, but also just being seen as, I mean, I don't know, we'll delve into it, but I think appearance and the way she looks is always another general theme of the book. And then her being a new wave kind of feminist. Like, she clearly is a feminist, but she's treated with a lot of disdain because it came out in an overtly sexual way. And I think that confused a lot of people, even people who were feminists at the time, 1993 or whatever. So those are the three identity kind of pieces that I saw as her overarching theme. Where do we agree, disagree, or
I totally agree with you. I think that's a really adept observation. I did think a lot about how she portrayed herself as an artist versus just sort of a real person. And also, as like you said, especially as a feminist and someone who is portrayed as being super strong, being independent and fierce. And a lot of the stories, however, that she tells, in fact, a little bit in some ways, every story she tells, goes into like her flaws, her faults, her insecurities, her weakness with men in some ways, or her faults with men.
Certainly certainly bad judgment in that.
Yeah, regard. Lots of bad judgment that definitely run counter to who she is in her music, right? And at first I was like, so this is just a book about all the different ways that she's an asshole.
Yeah.
But then like I went back and I listened to the prologue again, and then I kind of had a better appreciation of it, and that I really think she's exploring what it is to be an actual real human. Everybody's flawed. Everybody sucks sometimes. And she kind of explains it in the prologue about how, kind of blowing up what the flaws of yourself are is a way to examine them and learn, and that like there's something to be taken from exposing this unflattering side of yourself. And I started to feel like, wow, that's really brave. And actually that kind of does line up with who she is in her music, because she is brave and she's doing things in such a different way.
Well,
and she did that with this memoir as well. I
was going to say, she is real brave and everything, and she is talked about now as a feminist icon. But I want to point out one thing, in that she has always been treated with a little bit of respect and a little bit of disdain from the sort of musical media. Like this book here, this is the Trouser Press Record Guide to 90s Rock. Okay. So here they're talking about Liz Phair, and I thought this quote was really important. So she's talking about a particular track on Exile in Guyville, and it says, it raises issues that can't properly be settled in a 2-minute song. As illuminating and resonant as her impudent declarations of independence may be, she's also seen as a titillating cock teaser or a willing victim with a cute butt. And that's not accounting for suspicions that she may be a big phony. Ultimately, it doesn't matter where the truth and illusion is in all this lies. Phair cuts a potent figure in modern rock by stepping outside the boundaries against which such female pioneers as Chrissie Hynde, Holly Vincent, Joan Jett, and Nina Hagen had to strain. By changing the terms of the struggle, Phair helped add a critical why not option to the creative menu for girls with guitars. So, okay, on the one hand, they're trying to be complimentary, but on the other hand, they're getting in kind of sexist jibes at her at the exact same time that they're doing it. So I felt like that so sums up the way the media treated Liz Phair at the beginning, especially those first couple of years when she was a star, you know, when it was like, when she was on the cover of Rolling Stone and when Exile in Guyville just threw everyone for a loop because a woman said fuck over and over in a song. And like, that was like, holy smokes, like what's going on? The world is all topsy-turvy here, you know what? And so I think that that's a big part of it. And I think that weighs into a lot of her attitude about which stories she chose and what elements of her career she chooses to talk about versus doesn't choose to talk about. This isn't a book that really talks about the creative process, how she wrote songs, what their songs are about. There's virtually no reference to it at all.
None. I was frustrated by that. I'm sorry.
And so maybe that's a different type of memoir, but she is really presenting this identity issue, and that was the overarching thing that I couldn't help get away with in every one of her little stories, whether it was the Shanghai trip or whether it was she's banging her manager and cheating on her husband, and this kind of, all these different things are various forms of her identity and ways of challenging the identity that she feels like she's supposed to be presenting. That was what kept screaming out to me in every one of the stories.
Yeah. And, you know, I also think that it's like, yeah, people expect her to write a book that's about her career and about her music. And what they absolutely don't expect her to do is to write a bunch of stories that really read like short stories. I think we should make that clear to the audience. Like, this is not this is a genre bending memoir, in that it really does read more like a collection of short stories than anything. And within those stories, we go to a lot of different places and meander to different points in her life.
She's had this contradiction her entire career. People have put her in a certain place, and then that she seems to have it all figured out, you know, like she's just this icon that just knows everything and got it all figured out. And what you realize through horror stories is she does not have it all figured out, nor does she claim to have it all figured out in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And exactly, that's the point I was trying to get at, is that she's doing exactly what you do not expect her to do. And that's what her music
far
is.
For her, though. Here's the deal. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but if this is her, well, in addition to that book, this is her main book. Yeah. Yeah. The main book. I'm sorry. I feel as though I wanted to get to know her more, which was obviously what she wanted from us, but I wanted to even just get some direction. Who were her influences? How did she even start getting into music? I mean, listen, she's putting out a book. Tell us who you are.
I would have liked a little bit. Yeah, like you say, like get to know her a little bit. And she did tell some childhood stories. I found myself kind of confused timing wise. Like I guess because I relate to Liz Phair in terms of when her album came out, right? So her first album was 93, then it was 94, then it was like 97 or something. And then 2000. Okay. So if she's telling a story, like I can't tell what year she's talking about. Like, for a great example of this, she's talking about the trip to Shanghai, right? Where she was brought on an all expense paid trip to Shanghai to go do something to promote something or other. Now, she gets in this incident where she opens the door and hits somebody riding a motorbike on the side, and she's freaking out about how much money this is going to cost. And she's like, I might have to borrow money from my parents. Now I'm like, wait a second. Borrow money from your parents. Like, where are you in your career? Like, I thought this was, you're getting an all expense paid trip to Shanghai. Like, I figured it would have been 2010, 2015, like when she is firmly established. Now I'm thinking, was this in the 90s? Like, when did this? So little details like that distract me. Like, I can't tell when certain things were happening. College. Yeah, that's pre. Okay. I know that. And then you can talk about, you're going to do an appearance on the David Letterman show or whatever it is. Okay, now I know that you're in your career, your music phase, but like so much of the time I was just, I had no idea when this stuff was happening.
Yeah, agreed. And when
confusing.
she had her kid in the middle of it, like
Right.
in the middle of the book, I'm like, wait, you got married?
And when did that happen in her career? And then later she says, and then my son goes off to college. I'm like, college? When in the hell was he born? Like I was so confused by that stuff.
like in chapter 5, maybe, or 6, out of nowhere.
Right. So
I think White Chocolate Space Egg was when around the time that she might have recorded that when she was pregnant. I remember that from way back because I believe the baby is the White Chocolate Space Egg. Don't quote me on that.
I see. Now that I did not know, but that makes a lot of sense.
That in there. Does she like allude? Never mind.
There was a 3-year gap between Whip Smart and then that album, so it could stand to reason that was the time she maybe got married, had the baby or whatever, and then we all know, kind of based on the story, that her first marriage didn't exactly pan out very well, which was another part of her story that she was remarkably honest about, because she did not paint herself in a good light at all. I mean, made herself look like a real asshole because she was 100% in the wrong, and she didn't equivocate and try and make it seem like she wasn't 100% in the wrong. She completely was. And again, I like that kind of frankness, that kind of honesty in telling these short stories. I just wish I understood when it was happening in her life.
I like that too, because she totally could have written a book about, her rise to fame and her approach to art, and said a lot of things that painted herself in a great light, and she didn't. I mean, that story is the prime example of it, because you're like, ouch, man. I don't know if I could personally admit something like that for all to hear.
Hold on. Here's what we learned about her in the book. She's rough, just the details of, her vagina and like everything that was happening and her sex life. And that whole chapter, what was that word? The bidet. And she didn't care for that. She's just blunt as hell. She's kind of, crude, and that's fine. But,
well, I think that right there sums up her, the way people reacted to her music when it first came out. Because there were so many songs where she's like, she has that, like, fuck you till your dick turns blue, and singing all these, and you're just like, whoa, I don't usually hear women talking like this, number one, and number two, white, like suburban women, which is what she kind of appears as, a white college educated girl. And it threw so many people.
I think it was consistent throughout the book, which I listened to, by the way.
Yeah.
That was a whole, I like my kids in the car. I'm like, oh my God. But it's just consistently, that's who she is, and that's okay. But how did she get that way? We just missed pieces in this. I don't know. I felt like with Belinda Carlisle and the millions of other rock bios that I've read, or autobiographies, I just felt like I really knew the person more than I knew her. This was just, as you said, a collection of short stories.
Because like I said, I relate to Liz Phair in terms of the album. So I didn't know much about her personal life. I didn't know that she'd been married and divorced, and that then she was dating her manager, and then later on she was with, I mean, I didn't know any of that stuff. Her personal life has always been sort of removed from my understanding of Liz Phair, and that might have to do with the fact that I checked out in the late 90s of her. And I should say, though, she picked up a whole different audience that is much bigger and is still with her. Because I was surprised that although people like me kind of saw Liz Phair as a thing from the past, when she was at that 8035 festival, there were a lot of people who were genuinely excited when she played songs like Why Can't I, like her mainstream hits from the early 2000s. That was what they were there to see. So again, more of those contradictions of like, yeah, we hold her into this certain way of the Exile in Guyville and the boldness and the topless picture on the front and her saying fuck every other word and whatever. And then she did a 180 and presented herself in a different way. and people still are just like, well, where's the real you? Like, I don't get, and I think she's an enigma, you know, it's hard to pin her down, and maybe that's kind of her point too.
Can I just say that I did not realize that she sang "Why Can't I"?
Oh, really?
From 13 Going on 30. I love that movie. Remember?
What?
Go ahead.
What
it was
movie
in that movie, like 13 Going on 30. Remember, with Jennifer Garner? And,
Oh, I remember
Okay.
the movie. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, I
Yeah.
love that movie, by the way. Yeah, that's the main song in that.
Oh, okay. Because I knew I'd heard it, but
It was a
I
big
was like, did
hit.
somebody else, you know, like some, you know, young poppy person cover it? And maybe
Right,
I
because
heard
you
it on a
probably
commercial.
thought
go with her.
you probably thought it was Avril Lavigne because it was the songwriting team that that wrote all the hits for Avril Lavigne, and then she started working with them, and that was another thing that just pissed off all of
So
her
she
old
didn't write
fans.
that? She
I
just
think she
sang.
co-wrote it with these collaborators, the people
Okay.
who were working with who did Avril Lavigne stuff.
Here's where I turn the corner with her, because as I've indicated, I've never been a fan. And I don't know. There was just, listen, I love classic rock. I mean, you know, I don't know what to say, but I really, there's something about that time and the women and what I could never wrap my head around it. I couldn't relate to it. I was out. So, I started to change my tune with her, like with all her stories with men. Like, they were so crazy and so funny, and they were fun to read, and I could relate to most of them. I mean, not all of them, because I would never cheat on my husband, but you know, things like that. And I'm like, God, she's freaking wild, you know. And
well, let's delve into that a little bit.
Yes,
because
okay.
that was a big theme of the book, was also her failed relationships in a lot of ways, and a lot of them seemingly failed because of her. And I mean, her, you know, not the one guy who had a baby with his trainer or whatever. I mean, that's
That was something.
a different story too. But I mean,
she has a very bad picker. She's making very poor choices consistently, and she's ending up with the same dude every time.
well,
So, except for her husband, who didn't seem like that. But
there's that old expression, you know, you don't shit where you eat. And she was getting involved with her guitar player, and then with her manager, and then with you know, and it's like, okay, see, once you do that, though, once you've laid down that predicate, it might not be fair, but that way you're going to be judged by that in the industry. Like, you're somebody who sleeps with your band, you're somebody who sleeps with your manager, and that's going to taint people's view of you. And fortunately for me, I never knew any of that. Now, it doesn't taint my view of Liz Phair. I don't care. I don't know her on a personal level. But yeah, it does show that she has remarkably bad judgment when it comes to men, doesn't really think through consequences of things. Except when she was going to cheat on her husband, she was very aware that it was a bad idea, but she did it anyways.
Yeah, she wanted out, I think. I mean, I think she didn't do anything to stop that, even though she did know, as you said. So
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
and oh, this will they, won't they, whatever. She decided immediately, they will.
Well, she liked
it was just a matter of time.
Yeah, I mean, she liked the secrecy. She liked, like, the you know, secret courting phases, like the blackout. I mean, that sounds so fun. But yeah, all that stuff that was going on. She liked the thrill of it.
Yeah.
She just wanted to see what would happen. And, you know, the more secretive, the more, you know, taboo it would be, the better for her.
And probably the same with that one guy, what she called in the book, Rory, who was the sociopath who had the two girls, and was the one who had a baby with this other woman at the same time. And it's like, what was the deal with this dude? Like, why he was like supposedly like a gym rat, and he was like so good looking, and she didn't think she matched up with this guy. Like, where's the judgment there of going, hey, I'm a fucking successful rock star. Like, why am I dealing with this like low rent fucking gym rat guy? Like, you know, you'd think she'd have a better head on her shoulders with that sort of stuff. But hey, I mean, clearly we know from reading the book she doesn't.
Okay, I'm gonna allow me to put on my social justice warrior cape for just a minute.
Okay.
First, I feel like I have to say, like, yes, you were right that when you sleep with your manager, you sleep with your guitar player, that could impact your reputation. However, her manager was sleeping with her. Her guitar player was sleeping with her. Do those guys get fucked with over that? Absolutely not.
No.
They don't. It's
in that
because
instance,
she's
no.
a woman and we hold women to a different standard, and it's complete fucking bullshit.
Yeah,
So,
I'm with you on that. I'm with you
right?
on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's totally true. The only qualifier I would say, not with the manager, but with the guitar player, there's a difference in status, right? So
Right,
she's
because
the
like
boss.
she's his boss.
She's the boss, and he's
Yeah.
just an employee, and that does change it slightly.
And all of what we've said is true. Like, yeah, she was one of the first women to be super overt about like fucking men and, you know, using fuck every other word in her music or whatever. But like, men have been doing that forever. Like, they were doing that for decades before Liz Phair came on the scene, you know? And it's like, I just feel like we have to point out that why was it such a big deal? I mean, and well, we know why. It's because, again, women are held to a different standard, but like, she was just doing what men were doing. I mean, Exile in Guyville was a song by song reaction to Exile on Main Street, right? So like, and that's kind of the point, is like, well, the boys get to do this, why can't the girls?
No, and that's exactly
and
right.
I think that just speaks to her bravery, where I think some people thought like, well, she wants to be sexy or she wants to be controversial. And it's like, no, she's just stepping up to the plate and doing what every other fucking rock star has done.
Yeah,
well,
no, you're right. You're absolutely right.
And I think she wanted to be all of that, though. She wanted to be sexy. She wanted to be controversial. She also wanted to just be completely who she is and not have any restraints put on her.
Yeah, which is awesome. Like, that is totally fun. Like, because guess what? No person, no human, no rock star is one dimensional, right? Like, all of us have multitudes, and I think it's okay for her to want to be sexy and want to be a feminist at the same time. And I think that kind of makes her a badass, right?
I think the part of it isn't so much that, okay, well, men have been doing this for years and now a woman is doing it. Everyone's surprised. It's more like, A, what took you so long? You know, number one, and B, because nobody did it, and whether they were intentionally held back, whether managers told them don't talk like that or whatever, and she just did her own thing. Whatever, she broke open the floodgates. I think Alanis Morissette actually gets a lot more credit than Liz Phair does. And I'm not an Alanis fan, so I am frustrated by the fact that
neither is Jen.
that Alanis Morissette gets more credit because of that song where you going down on you in the movie theater or whatever. Like, that's her boldness. Liz Phair did that shit 2 years before.
You know, Dave, you made a good point about how you know, maybe there were artists that were wanting to have lyrics like Liz Phair's, but they weren't allowed to because of their management or whomever. And one thing that I think was really interesting that I had no idea is that, like, Liz Phair wanted to be an artist, like a visual artist, right? Like, that's what she always thought she was going to be. But then she's just like in her bedroom writing these songs and releases Exile in Guyville, and suddenly is a giant hit. You know, I mean, not on a like Avril Lavigne.
Well, but she was on the cover of Rolling Stone. She played on David Letterman. I mean, that's as big. And so that's big.
She did it without the influence of, I mean, she didn't have a manager. She didn't have a producer, really, like, not in the way that people with more fame would, where there's a lot more filters they put on you because they want things to be successful or whatever. And I also thought it was really interesting that that's why she had the stage fright. And I think she explained this in the short audiobook I listened to, not in the short stories.
Yes,
but she talked about like, she's like, I'd never really played on a stage. Like, I'd played twice on a stage when Exile in Guyville got huge. Like, she didn't have the practice. Like, she wasn't allowed a warm up
of getting ready, building up with confidence to the point where now you're famous. Now everybody's looking at you. Right. Everybody was looking at her right at the beginning. Like, I saw her in Seattle at this place I think it was called Ballard, Washington. And it was like, there was the hype of like, oh my God, Liz Phair's in town, you know, and whatever. And it's like, she was very timid on stage, and it was just like, it was okay. But I don't know that everyone walked out of there being like, yeah, that was an awesome show. Whereas I've seen some bands, when they're coming up, it's like you can just tell live they're there, but maybe they don't have it in the studio the same way Liz did. Liz came out with a record that was like all 18 songs are good. Like you don't have that on a debut most of the time.
This is what like creativity unmanaged, and you come out with Exile in Guyville. Like, I just think it's cool to see, like, if you just let somebody do what they're going to do without all the bullshit of people telling you how you should be, like, it's a brilliant album.
Okay, hold on a minute. Hold on. Okay, I want to go back to the beginning of the book where she is talking in like her imagination. Like, I get why she is a great songwriter, I understand that. I mean, her imagination is insane. Just the detail of hanging out with her brother and running around in the fields and, everything that they did. Like,
she's clearly a storyteller and
yeah,
good
absolutely.
with good with
absolutely.
Words. Yeah.
Yes. I get it. But I wonder at that time where she started doing the pop music, if she didn't have a manager, that told her to,
I think she did have a manager by that point.
But like when that guided her to go a different way, like
right. And she went to movie. And again, this isn't stuff that's addressed in the book, but I just know her career arc. She went to a different record label. She went to Capitol Records.
There you go.
There was a guy, the record label president at the time. His name was Andy Slater, notorious douchebag. But on her later album, this one, Fun Style, not a good album, by the way, but she wrote a song on it called And He Slayed Her. Andy Slater, talking about how much of a douchebag he was. Now, she does reference a record label president that hit on her and did some other untoward stuff. She didn't name names. Maybe that's who she's talking about because of the song reference on a later album. I'm just looking for clues here, but she did go to a new label. She did have a new manager. So there was some of that too. I think she did. She was being guided by other people to sort of go more mainstream.
No one knows what to think when you're acting like an...
I just wish we would have known, like with all her shenanigans and all this crazy stuff she had, like where she put that energy to. Like, I just wish we had better timelines,
Well,
so
the timeline was the thing that threw me, and that's the fatal flaw of the book, in my opinion, and is that I can't tell when this is happening. Now, I'm okay with nonlinear stories and parts going from here to there and here to there, but if there could just be a pinch of clarification as to just when we're talking about, so I know, did this happen before that? Like, I know she's telling a story about her childhood or about college. Okay, I know that happened before her talking about her son being born, obviously. Okay, that part's not hard to figure out. But if she's talking about the Shanghai trip or the New York blackout or her first marriage, like what was the order that stuff happened? I just can't figure that out. And maybe as a reader, just me, I'm annoyed by that because it confuses me. Maybe other people who read the book don't care about that, but I definitely did.
One thing that when you guys were talking that came to mind was, I agree, it would have been nice to have more of a framework where we would understand, the broad strokes of her life. And that's what we expect from a memoir, right? We kind of expect the Wikipedia page with more details. But man, we got way more than the Wikipedia page. Like, we got some very, very intimate details. Like, oh, you were on a flight and had sex on the plane under a blanket when there was and had to like stop when a stewardess came by. Like, shit like that is.
I forgot about that.
I mean, there were a lot of things in there that you would never expect a celebrity to share.
Yeah.
Ever. It's like fucking crazy.
Oh my God.
Well,
so in some ways, it's like juicier. I don't know.
I think it's
like you really get more of a sense of
what's so attractive and appealing about Liz Phair to me has always been there is that thing of like, okay, she seems like such a normal person. She seems like any kind of upper middle class girl that I would have known growing up and going to college and whatever. And then she has this totally other side that is revealed through her music. I think the gist of it is what Jen and I are talking about is we want a little bit more of the traditional memoir stuff, but I appreciate the way she presents it in a non-linear, traditional way. So it's like it's on the one hand it's great, on the other hand it's not. On the one hand, so that's where I think that's where I come down on it, is what I really did like this book, but it left me with a lot of questions. And if I ever met Liz Phair in person and I got to ask her one question, my question would be, Liz, what year did that Shanghai thing happen? I'm just so confused about that. Like, when was that? That's all I want to know. That story confused the shit out of me. I don't know why, but I just didn't get it.
So, okay. So Shelley, I'm going to assume that you really enjoyed the book because you love her, right? Like you really like her.
Well, I did enjoy it. I think she's a really good writer. Although I have to say there were moments where I was like, she's kind of a pain in the ass. Like she's actually kind of maybe a person in certain stories that I would find insufferable. And I don't know if that was just you in my head. I'm just teasing you.
No, I heard
but there were moments where I was like, fuck, I have loved this artist for so long, but I really don't like her as a person in a good handful of these stories.
Again, I think the most impressive part of the book is that she doesn't paint herself as the hero in any of the stories. She looks bad in about 75% of them. And that's just human nature. I mean, if people who put her on a pedestal, this should have come down a little bit, made her a little bit more real. And, I came out of it thinking like, okay, it doesn't really change my opinion of her music because I've already liked it. I love those first 3 albums and nothing will take that away from me. But, am I more interested? I probably would have passed on this show coming up if there weren't some a little bit renewed interest because of the book and because I'm giving her another chance. My Liz journey is changing. This is probably part 3 because initial part in the 90s when I loved her, and then I was indifferent for a long time, and now I'm dipping my toe back in. Now I'm re-engaged.
Just want to bring something else up. I sent you both the email with her in the mom shop. Well, it's not really a mom shop. It's like where I get all my clothes. So she's pairing up with this store where she's gone totally mainstream and is appealing to like the 50-something mom or,
that actually makes sense though, because when I said that I saw her a couple years ago at 8035 Fest and the crowd was very receptive to, Why Can't I and some of her hits, that seemed like the crowd. It was a very mainstream crowd, moms in their 40s and 50s who loved her in college, or maybe they're a little bit younger than us. So their college was more like the early 2000s. Now they're like a mom in their late 30s and their early 40s, and Liz Phair is one of their people. It makes sense to me that she can be like a sort of a brand ambassador for the mainstream, mom crowd of the current era, because they grew up with Liz Phair slightly differently than maybe Shelley and I did, but they're still with her.
Well, I mean, and I think she did a good job of talking about a thing that we don't think about much as listeners, which is the actual business of music. I mean, and one thing I really respected that she said was, I don't miss a show. I'm sick, I'm, whatever, there's a snowstorm, I'm not missing a show. And music is business to her. And, it makes you, just thinking about like my own career, like in the opportunities that you decide to take because you want your career to grow or you need the money or what have you. I mean, it's not really any different for her. And I never think about that at all with musicians that like, they might struggle with money, like the Shanghai story. It's like, what? You're worried about? That's the thing you're worried about right now?
She was amped to get a free trip, all expenses paid.
Yeah.
And then when that accident happened, it was like, shit, what if this is like I can maybe get $5,000, but anything more than that, I'm gonna have to borrow from my parents. And I'm just like, that's why I want to know how old she was at that point. But
it was probably early on, don't you think?
well, she did say she was going to contact her record company and see if she could get an advance. So she at least had records out and had a record company that would be willing to advance her money.
Yes.
So at least is the second album.
Early.
I would
that
say.
Was early. We could probably Google all this stuff and put a timeline together. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to do that either. I'm going to keep the mystery there, but
yeah,
that would make us way too professional.
got that right. Yeah, yeah.
Liz has dealt with that her most of her career of like being looked at as a sellout because people loved those initial records so much. I think at this point she does not give a shit.
Good for her though.
All. Yeah.
It's literally she's going back with those pop songs. She is literally that's where she's gaining a bulk of her base, right? Am I right? Like even now?
When she wrote Exile in Guyville, she's just like, hey, I'm doing my thing, right? And then I think she says that she was surprised to learn how many other women saw themselves in those songs and in those messages. And I feel like we're kind of doing the same thing with horror stories, where it's like, yeah, these stories are wild. They don't paint her in a great light necessarily all the time. There's some that are very shocking. Like when she went through line by line of all the different ways that she's been approached inappropriately by men.
Oh,
like as a woman we've all experienced this bullshit, right? But like, even as a woman, I was like, Jesus, there's so much there. Like, how the fuck did you keep going? And so I just think it's really interesting how her stories represent so many different things, but I really think it is, again, an opportunity for people to see themselves in these stories, even though she probably doesn't expect them to. Like the Rory story, what it's like to date a sociopath. It's like, fuck, I've dated a dude like that.
You take out some of the details, and I think a lot of those stories are very relatable to almost everybody. I mean, everyone's had these kinds of experiences.
Yes, they all are.
Just not the specific details. Yeah, she is able to show that that she's led a life that is relatable to a lot of people, and that even if you're a famous rock star on the cover of Rolling Stone, you're still dealing with this stuff. You could potentially be dating a complete liar who says one thing to your face and is just a complete, whatever. That you're not immune from it just because you're famous or just because whatever. You're still dealing with the stuff, and that's another part of these horror stories. Is it's not just rock star stories. A lot of these are just personal story, a relatable personal story.
And that's what she wanted to share with us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that to me, that's where I turned my corner with her. I mean, listen, I never hated her. I didn't know a thing about her, just her music. Her, and the other one I'm allergic to is Joan Osborne.
Oh, she's terrible. I don't like her.
She's terrible.
I couldn't name a single one of her songs.
They did a tour with Liz Phair, The Breeders, Belly, Throwing Muses. Yeah, you can even throw on Letters to Cleo. You can throw on the Juliana Hatfield 3. You can throw all of that stuff. I would love all of that. I would go to that in a heartbeat, or a cruise.
I would go as well.
90s Women of Rock cruise. I'd be on that thing in a heartbeat too. Like they do those cruises with older bands or whatever, and they do concerts on the boat.
We could do an episode from a cruise.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
Fun.